All right, we're going over our second film from the Oscars. God help us. Welcome to the HolmFront. Hello, welcome to the HolmFront. I'm Tyler, your host, and as always, to my right is Mitch, who is not wearing the same sweater as a previous episode.
But I'm wearing a different shirt. A different day.
Okay, yeah, different day.
Yeah. What's wrong with you?
So I don't want to set the precedent right off the bat. We're going to try and hit as many of the Oscar films as possible. And in fact, at some point, I think we'll bring up a conversation about the Oscars because I think it's an important discussion to have. And we had this offline on a phone call. I thought it was pretty interesting. The Oscars themselves, I can see why it's so difficult to pick films and what gives them merit to either deserve or not deserve to be part of them. But we decided to watch a couple of them. And this one that we recently saw was something that was a limited release well after it had been developed. So it had been released, in Canada first or something like that, right?
I'm not sure the exact path. But yeah, because it's an independent film,
Right.
I guess, or partially.
But it is under A24. So it has...
well, it was made on like under $10 million is the thing.
Wow.
Yeah, because it doesn't look that way. And
No,
so
it
it's
looks
kind
great
of
for
a
that.
monumental achievement just for the sake of it existing, looking as good as it does, considering the budget constraints.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is The Brutalist.
So we saw The Brutalist. By the way, do you have any announcements for Oscarinas or your personal channel? This is going to be in February.
I'm working on things.
Working on things. If you want, just check his channels down below
Nice.
in the description. Also, I have a Twitter and Instagram. I guess I should start doing this from now on, right? Is if you want to reach out or if you want to see more of our stuff, like I try and put more stuff on those these days. I'm bad with the social media, but if you have any questions or like suggestions, or if you want to see us do something, i.e., there's a current running for whether we're gonna do Rings of Power or not.
Don't ask for us to do Rings of Power because we won't do that. 'Cause
I'm
I
gonna
have
make
no
him
interest
watch
in
Rings of Power. So,
but you can request almost anything else.
yeah, you request whatever you want. Also, if you like the videos, like and comment. We do want to hear what you guys think of, either our opinions or these films themselves. Like, we do like hearing from you guys. I've seen it seems like comments have become more common these days, but anyway, I do want to hear what you guys have to say. So, see down below. I feel weird saying that. Also, last thing, yesterday I went to pick up a birthday present for my dad. We're in January, by the way. This is January 26th. We're not supposed to be talking about that since this is going to release way later, but whatever. So I was picking up a present for my dad at Target.
Okay.
And I think this is a mutual friend, so I mean it's not that special. But someone that worked at Target apparently saw me, like, because I was writing in the birthday card, and she goes, "Hey, HolmFront," and like I heard it just like distantly, but I was writing, and I was like, "Did she just say the name of my show?"
That's awesome.
And so I like turned and I was like, "What?" And she goes, "HolmFront, right?" And I said, "Yeah." How are you doing? What do you do with that? I just good to meet you, I guess. She's like, "Cool, yeah, I'm friends with so and so, a couple of mutual friends of ours." And I was like, "Oh, all right." I don't.
Wait,
so I
with
don't.
me or
No, some
Okay.
people that I know from other circles, but
okay.
I don't know if she watches the show or if it's just an Instagram thing. I have no idea. It was weird,
Hello, fan.
very surreal to be noticed by not my name but the name of the show. Anyway.
You
Yeah.
are now the show.
We are now famous.
Look
Not
at that.
at all. Not at all. It's anyway.
That's pretty rad.
It's the first step. It's for first milestone.
That's dope.
Yeah, it's not that cool, but it was all right.
I think it's cool.
It was neat. One day we'll have like millions of followers and be like, "You remember that one time that one person recognized me in my
Yeah, we're not gonna be able to go anywhere with it. We'd have to shield ourselves as we're running
Paparazzi again.
as we're running to our limos.
Yeah.
Just,
No, stop! Don't get away from me. As if we don't film ourselves for a living right now.
I know.
Okay, so Brutalist, we saw it the other day.
Yeah.
Like I said, limited release. I think it was only out for a week where we are.
It came back though because of all the Oscar buzz it's getting.
Okay.
So I will just say this right off the top. If you have a chance to go see this movie in the theater, go watch it. Just be prepared that you will not leave the theater satisfied. It's a horribly unsatisfying movie.
Very.
But go see it because you're basically never going to get a chance to see anything like it at the theater. So
That's fair. And a couple different levels, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's start with what was good. What do we like?
Well, the cinematography was amazing, and
Yes, it was.
It
The
was
aspect ratio is pretty cool to experience.
yeah, it's just this huge. He just took up everything, and
Yep.
he shot it, I guess, in VistaVision, which has not been used in like 40 years. So that's part of the reason why I'm saying to just go see it
It looks very classical
on
to
original
like a,
film too, on
right.
like actual film, not digital.
Yeah, it almost looks like a modern day like 70s film or something. And it's I don't know, it's
Yeah.
almost nostalgic just in that way.
Yeah,
And that's kind of cool. So yeah, and with that the cinematography was pretty incredible. Looks really great.
yeah.
Um
There's just so many like shots or like when the library scene and they're like showing how the light pours through their windows, and it was just like, wow, this is something. So yeah, it's just a really beautiful film, just from a purely like filmmaking aesthetic level, from a craftsmanship level, and that extends to other things too, like the music and the acting. The music is like really interesting too because it's really big and commanding and bombastic, but then it has like moments of quiet, like these piano melodies that are really just soothing. And then it also has like dissonance and disruption and disquiet. And it somehow makes all of these things come to bat at the same time. And you pointed out, interestingly enough, it doesn't always match what you're seeing on screen, but it does match like the overall vision of the project very well. It's a nice accompaniment. And it's one of those scores that makes me think in hindsight, if you were ever to watch the movie again, you'd appreciate it more. But I know you'll probably never do that.
I'll never watch it again. Foreshadowing. Also the performances, super great. But I mean, when you have people like Adrian Brody and Guy Pearce, I mean,
Yeah.
Also the sky's blue. But I mean, arguably between the two, Guy Pearce steals the show every time he comes on screen. Just he's such a commanding presence. He's just like, I don't know what he does exactly, but he just whenever he's there, he just has this like, I'm here now. And it's hard not to see him. It's just the lines he gives, but the way he gives them, and he has such a stage presence. It's hard not to notice.
Yeah, it's like he uses every fiber in his being as part of the performance.
Right.
And I don't know how he's able to do that, but it's like the weird muscles you never notice, like in your neck or something. Like he's using that muscle.
He's employing it somehow.
Yeah,
and we noticed it.
Yeah, every second he was on screen, I was just grinning from ear to ear.
Right.
Minus,
you could tell he's such well, I mean, yeah, except for one scene. He's having such a great time, though.
Yeah.
He's kind of like Cary Grant in Heretic.
Or
just like, yeah.
Not Cary Grant. You mean Hugh Grant.
Hugh Grant.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah.
When he just commands every scene. When he comes on, it's like no one else stands a chance here. He's like, well, yeah, he's here now, so
yeah.
You guys all should just leave at this point.
Yeah, Guy Pearce is honestly like this might be my favorite acting performance just ever. Just like flat out ever. Cuz like the way he plays, I mean, he's like this, tycoon businessman from the 40s and 50s, and it was just he just relishes in it.
Yes, he
right?
does.
He feels like a character who would be in like a Lovecraftian novel or something like
kinda.
that. Like the kind of businessman who sponsors the main character to go off and like investigate something.
That's really fascinating. Yeah, go.
Yeah, and he's a collector. He collects these art pieces, but then it's like
Money
one of them's
is no
cursed.
object.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it just kind of made me. I had those feels throughout the whole time. So he was just totally great. But Adrian Brody too. In fact, it would surprise me. Adrian Brody has not been up for an Oscar. He is now, but not since The Pianist, which he won for. But that was a long time ago, and he was apparently very young when he won that. He was in his 20s or something like that. Wow. So this has been a long time since then, and I didn't know that because I've always just assumed that Adrian Brody is like the pinnacle of like great actors. So the fact that this is only his second nomination, I was like, that's kind of wild. He's so good.
Yeah.
why does it take so? I don't know.
He's one of those just kind of melds into whatever role he's given.
Yeah,
And I mean, he's got quite a few. He's one of the Predator films. Did you know that?
he's in a Predator film.
Yes, he is.
I did
I'm
not
gonna
know
have
that.
to show you this.
Huh?
But he's the main character. This is the one where they take them to the planet, but he's like the main human character. You'll have to watch it.
It's
It's
so weird.
surprising, but yeah, it's Adrian Brody.
Hmm.
Okay, and then we've got a couple independent scenes, which I feel we'll just go through those when we go through them. But there's a couple of them that stand out really well. And then there seems to be a common criticism with the film is that the first half seems to be more focused than the second half, which we'll go over too subsequently.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's just start from the top. So this movie seems to be tackling a couple of different larger themes. Also, I think I should start with this. I thought, and I don't know, was it you that told me this, that it was like a gangster movie? It was like The Godfather as if it was directed by Scorsese.
I told you that.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry.
You were very wrong.
But that was what someone had told me, which
Right.
made me interested to see the movie. And
So
then
I
sent it
legitimately
to
thought that we were going into a gangster film. So like half of this movie, I'm expecting some gangster stuff to go down,
right,
and it doesn't.
right.
Like, because
Okay, actually, let me
Well,
talk
we'll
about
get
that
on
for a minute, because
Sure.
because it wasn't just like one person said that. As I did more research after the movie, I was like, who said that? And then as I did more, it was like everybody's just like, oh my gosh, this is like the Godfather of movies, and this is like, just the
did we
pinnacle.
watch the same movie?
That's what I thought.
On
Like,
Earth?
I get like very vaguely what they're trying to say. What they're trying to say is that this movie, it's so big and it's so long and it's shot in that old style and it has just so much fervor and confidence in what it's trying to do that it feels like this movie that cannot be ignored. But that doesn't make it The Godfather, and that doesn't make it in any way thematically like The Godfather. Yeah, he's an immigrant who comes to the U.S. and it has
Was that the defining factor that made them similar?
a part of it, but also like,
Okay.
the fact that it's, The Godfather was from the 70s, and this looks like it's from the 70s. And this is,
okay.
people talk about like a time capsule movie and stuff. Here's the thing. I'm still a little bit frightened to even discuss this film because this is a movie that's going to take like a decade or 2 decades to like just bake.
Settle in, yeah.
Right. No one's going to have the definitive word on this movie for a very long time. And I'm calling it now because everybody who talks about it can't tell me what it's about. They just give me the spark notes of like the kind of prevailing themes that occur in the movie, and that's it. And I'm like, that's not good enough. And there's a really interesting position because normally I don't want the movie, like I don't want someone to just be able to explain it so easily. I want to be able to have my own interpretation.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it shouldn't be so hard that we can't get anything
Sure.
from it. There should be a conclusion.
Yeah, would we see this on Tuesday?
Yeah, last Tuesday.
And today's Sunday. So we've had all that time to let it bake in our heads.
Yeah.
And then we sat here for a good, 15, 20 minutes writing out a script. And even then we're struggling with some of this stuff. Like it just seems so abstract.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what the movie's trying to do. So we're going to tackle it the best we can.
Yeah, let me give one more kind of thing to keep in mind as we go scene by scene, is that this movie introduces like a ton of subplots and then just drops them. It does it all the time. It doesn't care that you're interested in that subplot. It's over now. That scene ended. Move on.
Like The Room. I have breast cancer. It's not that big of a deal. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Is this ever going to come up again? I don't have time to explain movie script to you.
Yeah, it is a lot like that. Yeah, because there's so many things about this movie that like it's told with so much like, and then like it just kind of like, and it does this repeatedly, and it must be intentional, and we can talk about that. But like that's why I said it's not going to be satisfying because you're going to naturally want to invest in things.
Yeah.
And then when you do, the movie's going to be like, why'd you do that? You're like,
well, you brought it up.
It's a movie? Should I not have been interested? Because that's the thing. Like, this movie's way harder for your everyday moviegoer than, like, The Godfather.
Yeah.
The Godfather is a crowd pleaser. yes, it's very like highbrow and it's very thematically rich and there's a lot of depth there. But there's still like enough like it's slow, but there's still enough like moments where like, someone gets shot and then they've got to someone gets into power.
Right.
There's like good motions and like your gangster stuff.
Well, there's consequences and there's actions.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. And they're all clear.
Yeah.
Not so in this one.
Yeah, so like to give you an impression, the opening scene is Adrian Brody, he's like in this darkened space and you have like the music and it's kind of dissonant and weird. And then he's like, there's a crowd of people and he's running around and he's like, he pauses to like look out a window and then he like kind of pushes past some people and we don't get to see what he's looking at. We don't really get to see much of anything.
This is I just looked it up, it's 3.5 hour movie.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of time in there.
15-minute intermission.
That's true. There is that. Yeah, 3.5 hours. It's a long freaking movie. It's a lot of movie.
Yeah.
To sit there and be like constantly disappointed with these things being dropped.
And that's what made it so frustrating for me is because in the last like 30 minutes is when I finally gave up. I was like, I can't anymore movie. You need to give me something. I'm working really hard.
Yep.
So anyways, I'm working hard again for you, movie. For you. And anyways, he's climbing. And it's like at the end of this opening sequence, he kind of comes on what's now revealed to be the deck of the ship. And then the camera kind of pans around and you could see the Empire State or the
which is the poster, by the way.
Not the Empire State Building, but the Statue of Liberty, and it's like upside down or whatever. It's the poster. So it's in that opening scene, and then the music just
yeah, it's
and you're
a
like
lot.
So powerful, but then it's like, where are we going with this?
I don't know. Just follow us. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I feel like I was taking over too much. Do I continue or do you need to?
No, keep going. You're good.
Oh, because you don't want to do the next scene.
Well, there's that. Well, no, I think more just making sure that you got your kind of overview points, because now we're gonna get a little bit more.
Yeah, well, like actually, let's
pointed.
focus on what was bad then. So I gave you kind of an overview of like we kind of established what was good and sort of like the big picture of what this movie is doing.
Yeah.
And what's bad about it though? Why is it not working?
Okay, so like you mentioned, it kind of alludes to like an immigrant plot, and then later it kind of alludes to like a capitalist type plot because you got this like tycoon, and then he's trying to commission an artist, so there's a dichotomy there. So like there's a lot of things that it brings up, but it doesn't ever fully commit. And so you're constantly, like you said, he keeps dropping you. So it starts with he's on a boat, and the text on screen, and I forget what language it is, but his wife is.
It's Hungarian, right?
It's
Because
something.
they're from Hungary.
It's something like that. So his wife is voiceover. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's a voiceover of a letter that she wrote to him, and kind of like setting up the basic premise of the plot. So they're under Russian invasion essentially, or occupation, and he's running away. And for some reason, the wife and the niece cannot come with him, so he's going to America. So it sets up that he's running from something. He's not coming to America for opportunity. I guess innately he is, but he's more running away from something. And
Yeah, I mean, he had to pick America. He could have picked somewhere else, I suppose.
Sure. But I mean, it's less of like an ambition of his to go to America and more of out of necessity. So it sets that up, and then he gets to America, and it's, he's got a wife and a niece that he left behind. And so you think initially, just again, it's like implied, oh, okay, so he's going to start trying to find a way to get them to come here. And it kind of leads you to that conclusion as well.
Well, you naturally are going to assume that. I mean, that's his family. Why wouldn't he want to get them over?
But then he directly off the boat.
Immediately.
He like steps off the boat and is like, where's the brothel?
Yep.
And just straight there. It's like, okay, not going to look for a job. Not going to like discuss some paper stuff. Like whatever goes with the immigration policy. He's like, nah, find me the nearest prostitute. Let's go. So the first thing you get after finding out what his wife has said and how she's like, we'll follow you when we can, blah, blah, blah. He's like, all right, fine. I'm in the line of opportunity. The first opportunity I want to gash in on is this. And so you get this like real awkward graphic scene where you're like, all right, so this guy's just kind of a crap person. Okay, so like right off the bat, you dislike him. because his wife sounded real sincere and kind, and he left her in like this really dangerous situation. But like he just wants to get his rocks off as soon as he gets over to America. It was just like, oh, okay,
So to play devil's advocate a little bit,
sure,
because I mean I'm mostly with you. I'm with you for a slightly different reason though. The a more generous look at this is that like he's coming from so much pain and so much like
sure, it's an
such
escape.
such trauma. Yeah, it's just like he's here now, and it's like there's so much bent up energy. We just have to release this energy. Like we have
Well,
to right now
and
because
to be
like oh my
fair-
god, I'm gonna kill myself if I don't, or
To
kill
be
somebody
fair,
else.
he does express a lot of doubt whether he's going to be able to get his wife and niece over. So I get all that.
Okay, yeah.
It just was interesting that's like he doesn't even kind of like slowly succumb to it.
No.
I mean, even if that happens on the boat, you don't get to see it. So all you know is that he steps off the boat and he just runs right away.
Yeah.
And so you don't really you don't get any time to empathize or sympathize. You just get, oh, okay.
And that's more the point that I do agree with. Like my issue with it was it introduces your main character in this really not accommodating light.
Right.
And then it perpetuates this for him and everyone else throughout the entire movie. There's no one in this movie that I liked. I hated every single character, and I kind of like hated them all uniquely and with some kind of fervor. Or I was completely apathetic. So even though like I love the performances by
Oh, yeah.
Adrian Brody and Guy Pearce and Felicity Jones as well,
yeah.
they're all great performances, but it's like their characters were these detestable people. If anything, the one person I didn't hate was Guy Pearce's character, who ends up being the most horrible villain of all. But you're like, but I kind of liked him. He was actually nice. I mean,
Right.
he teeters, like he's got his ugly side, but like at least he had his positive side, so I could accept the good with the bad. With Adrian Brody, it just felt like bad. It just felt like, where's the integrity of this man?
Yeah, he
Where's
was
his
bordering on nihilism. It's
yeah,
just like there's no point, blah blah blah. Just kind of work until I die. But it was just like, geez, man, it just didn't feel like he had any ambition in anything. And so that was kind of my point of the movie is that, like I was saying before, there's a commentary I heard about the movie John Carter, which is a Disney film based on an old classic novel or series of novels. But basically, the film takes away any motivation of the character of John Carter, and he just kind of gets dumped into each situation, which he has to respond to. But it takes away from you, like, wanting the character to succeed, right? There's no rooting for a hero because he doesn't have any personal ambition. So like he gets dragged to Mars and he just is given these abilities and then he just happens to be around when the princess is in danger. Like he does save the princess, but it's not for him wanting to, right? So and then by happenstance falls in love with the princess because of the situations that he finds himself in. That kind of feels the same with Laszlo, is that he's out of necessity goes to America and then just out of like happenstance falls into these circumstances that give him opportunity, but he never seems to be grateful for these opportunities.
Nor does he seem to ever really care or want them in the first
Right,
place.
and that's where it gets frustrating because it's like, well, don't you want to use these to try and either be successful in America? Like if you just go into the basic premise, like I don't think I can get my wife here, and you got to show that, by the way, which they did not. Maybe at least show him like, well, okay, well I got to make something of myself while I'm here, so I'll do X, Y, and Z. Instead, the first bit of resistance he comes into contact with, he just kind of gives up. He's like, well, I guess that's over, so I'm just going to go be a failure now. I'll still work. I'll never stop working, but I got these drugs and stuff that I can hang out with. It's
he's like a massive drug addict, and he just like watches porn, and you have to watch porn now, 1940s porn, because that's what he's watching. And it's like, all right, this is a weird this
with
is
no reason. Like it doesn't.
no,
It doesn't justify its existence in the film. It's just like, oh, this is just somewhere we can drop this. And I was like, well, okay, does this show me anything except for he's depraved? I already know he's depraved. He's been shooting up stuff since he got here. He slept with a prostitute the minute he got off the boat. Like I understand he's a depraved human being. I don't need any more proof.
Yeah,
they're like, no. He's look at this. Like, oh.
Again, the more charitable outlook is something along the lines of like, A, he's self-destructive, and
Clearly.
B, he's like, it's like he doesn't feel that there's going to be like he's already given up on himself, right? Like he's already concluded for himself, I'm not going to see my wife and my family. I'm never going to see them again.
Right.
It's over.
So there's essentially no meaning anymore. So I'm just going to go down this path until it kills me because I don't have the strength to do it myself.
Right. Exactly. I'm never going to see the buildings I made.
Right.
You know, those are gone. There's a really tender scene that happens later on where he actually gets to see pictures of the buildings because he's an architect that he constructed.
Which is the first time you learn that he's an architect. I mean,
you learned that before.
He builds this library, but it's kind of unclear. Like, there's nowhere where someone comes up and being like, "You're a famous architect. I need your help with this." There's a scene where he works for his friend who's in a furniture store.
Okay, but that makes sense because his friend is, it was like his cousin or something. His cousin is just like, "Oh yeah, Laszlo, like, yeah, you could make some furniture." It's like, dude, this man made freaking massive buildings.
But my point is they didn't introduce him as that. It almost makes you think he's like a carpenter or something, or like he build furniture. Like it doesn't clarify what he does. And then it goes into the scene where he builds the library and you think that he's just kind of an add-on, but then he starts like aligning the room properly and you're like, "Oh, so is he in charge of this project? I thought he was just signed on with this other guy."
Oh, I assumed he was in charge.
And then you have the scene where they get kicked off, which we'll get into in a second here. But then it goes to that scene, and that's when it makes it really clear, like, oh, he's a famous architect from somewhere foreign, Hungary or whatever it is.
Budapest.
And, like, he's well known over there. But over here, nobody knows about him. Guy Pearce had to do a bunch of digging in order to figure that out. And that's when you first figure out what the weight of that is.
Yeah.
And you would think that would come through in the movie because you'd think you'd be trying to, like, be this person, not famous maybe, but hey, I'm like a well-known architect. I'd like to get into this industry over here with all the opportunity in America. But it doesn't bleed through. He kind of just like, well, this guy gave me a job at a furniture store, so I guess I'll just go with that and sleep in the closet until I get kicked out. And that's what happens. The wife basically claims that he makes a pass at her when he doesn't. And then the guy just believes his wife and is like, "You're lucky I'm not beating you up. You're out of here by tomorrow." And it's like, "Oh, okay." And he's like, "Well, I guess I'll just go be nothing now."
Okay, yes. But, like, try to get, like, the mood, because I'm still, like, with you, but I am starting to get a little bit more of, like, they're taking a lot in the movie and just, like, there's a lot of assumptions. They're like, just assume this, assume this, assume
whatever
that.
Movie you see that does not hold your hand at all, this movie will make that
look like,
it'll make it look like that movie's been holding your hand the whole time. Like, this doesn't give you anything at all. It's like, keep up, man. You're like,
yeah.
Okay.
Keep up. Yeah, exactly. It is a lot like that. You're like, woof. But, like, another, like, way to kind of view that sequence of events is like, okay, so if I'm some relatively established artist and then my country goes to hell basically because of this world conflict, and then the only way to, like, survive it is to just flat out leave it and go to another country, and then I go to that country and I have to start at rock bottom with nothing.
Sure.
It's like, that state of mind is going to be tremendously damaging. And so, like, when he's like with his cousin or whatever, and then she makes an accusation, and I mean, I knew he was an architect going in. I must have read the synopsis somewhere or something. I probably should have told you that. I didn't realize it would be that hard to figure out.
Well, to be fair, I also did not know that the brutalist meant it was a type of architecture. I didn't know that at all.
Okay.
But I also thought that this was a gangster movie. So even at that point, I'm still wondering when the gangster stuff's going to start happening. I was like, is this when he kind of snaps and starts taking over this place or what?
Yeah.
I was totally misled.
I was misled. I know. I feel bad.
Sure.
And what a movie to mislead a person on.
Oh, my gosh.
That's why I really
about disappointment.
Yeah, because I'm really resentful, I guess, of those, or the action that people took of saying, like, this is like The Godfather. People are saying that. Tell them, shut up.
It's not.
It's not like it.
At
It's
all.
nothing like The Godfather. Yeah, it has a look from the 70s. There's a lot of movies that look like that.
Yeah.
They were made in the 70s. So anyways, the
Just
time
because the
capsule
aspect ratio is the same does not mean it's similar.
Exactly. The time capsule argument, that's a valid one. It does feel like a
That's
time
fair.
capsule movie.
Yeah.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Okay. But there is some, like, redeeming things. But again, it's like, this is where I mean by, like, a subplot we don't do anything with. He's, like, in line to get, like, free food at like a food soup kitchen or whatever. It's very like Depression era looking situation, and there's like this guy and his kid waiting in line, and then they run out of food and they don't have enough, and then he sticks up for them, and he says,
Right, they run out before it gets to Laszlo or the guy and his kid,
mm-hmm.
and they say, "Hey, no one can eat," and the guy's like, "Well, I got a starving kid here. Why can't you? Isn't there something you can give us?"
Right.
And so yeah, they portray him as a really sympathetic character in that moment.
But see, here's the thing, like. Where was the follow up to that? Because he says, "Well, I'll come back tomorrow.
Yeah,
I'll get you food," and they don't follow it up. There's
well,
no follow up.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing because he was like, "Yeah, you guys sleep in tomorrow. Make sure your kid is rested. I'll hold a place in line so you can come in and make sure that he gets food tomorrow, even at the expense of his own, starvation."
Right.
But yeah, you're right. It doesn't ever show up again.
It doesn't show up again.
It just shows you that part. Just
and
so
also,
it's like, well, you don't need the payoff if he said it or if he made his compunction is there.
Right, right. And the other thing about this is like let's say they wanted to use this scene as a moment to establish that Laszlo is a sympathetic person.
Sure.
Why didn't they make sure that he got food and this other people didn't, and then he gives his food to them? Because then you would accomplish everything right there in that one scene.
There's that.
They chose not to do that, and just to have Laszlo say it and then not follow it up. These are really weird choices because it makes it a lot harder for the viewer to be like, oh, yeah, likable person. He did that good thing.
Right.
Instead, you don't get that. And so when we're like railing on the main character, it's because like, what are we left with? We're left with the prostitute scene. We're left with the porn scene. We're left with like numerous occasions of him just like, shooting up in bathrooms and stuff, like numerous. And you're like,
it's a lot.
Why do I get all of this and I don't get the thing that was supposed to humanize you as a person? So it's just a very odd choice, and I don't know how to feel about it yet. And it's almost like, on the one hand, it does feel like it puts me more in like Laszlo's like just horribly depressed state of mind. That's what I felt like. It's like if I'm in an artist mood, I'm just like, ugh, just like everything is losing, and I'm just a loser, and life is over. That's what this movie feels like. So yeah, that was another bit of. There's like this dinner scene afterwards. So let me back up a little bit. So he's commissioned to do this library, and he does this incredible job. It's beautiful. Yeah. It is just like this gorgeous
and that's
library.
That's where the movie really shines too, is being able to express that through film.
Yeah.
They do a great job of making this thing, like, you really get across what they did architecturally with this room.
Yeah.
And it looks fantastic.
It's completely transformed.
Yeah.
And you're just like, wow. Like, anybody would just be over the moon over it. But what happens is it's like...
Well, they're commissioned by a son, which they don't know. And then the father comes home who actually owns the home and just flips out. And that's Guy Pearce, which...
I hate surprises.
What are you doing in my home? Yeah, but he steals the show as soon as he comes in, which is
he's
great.
Just flaming mad. He's like, my sick mother. Like, and it's like, who are you people? What have you doing with my books? It's just like on and on and on. And they're just patiently like explaining to him. And he doesn't buy any of that. He's just flaming mad. So he kicks them out and he doesn't pay them. And you're just like, oh man, that's just so horrible. And here's where you start to think to yourself, all right, so this is like attacking like, big businessman, capitalism bad, like he picks on the little guy and the immigrant guy and like how terrible is all that. But here's the thing. It's like a scene or two later, we see Laszlo's working construction, which is like terrible and
way beneath his talent.
Way beneath his talent, basically. And then Guy Pearce shows up and takes him out to lunch and has this conversation with him. And it's one of the best scenes in the movie. It's where he
arguably the best.
Probably the best,
because you can actually connect to it for one. But there's also clear stakes and things, which is great.
It's this emotionally powerful movie where Adrien Brody is just devastated and hurt, and Guy Pearce is like, I didn't realize you were such a talented, artist, but I also just didn't have the patience in that moment to really see what you had done. And so he pays him the money, and he's like, it wasn't my idea that you shouldn't be paid. And, that's wrong. You should still be paid. And then he invites him over to his house for dinner. And so, like, you can be mean-spirited and be like, oh, well, he's just doing platitudes now. But it's like he's covering a debt. and he's extending a hand of compassion. And he did research to dig up this guy's work, and he brings him photos of his stuff. And Adrian Brody's like, I didn't even know there was anything existed left of my art. So like, it was like such a compassionate gesture, and it's like done in his own way. I get he's not the nicest guy in the world, but it's like these are still like really meaningful things. Not like that scene at the, waiting in the soup kitchen. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like he actually, like Guy Pearce comes in and delivers tangible things that mean something to Adrian Brody's character. And it's like, but the film it's much later, but it's at the very end. It wants us to see Guy Pearce's character as just this total monstrous villain. And I'm like, I don't know. He did him a solid here. Like, and he didn't have to do any of that. He could have just been like, I'm rich, whatever.
So to jump on that, the couple of reasons why that scene itself accomplished a lot, which is one of the reasons why it resonated so much. So while Adrian Brody is working, Guy Pearce finds him on the work site. So he's currently shoveling, and he's like covered in soot, and he's like shoveling coal. And Guy Pearce is like, I want to take you to dinner. So he drives him. So he puts him in his own personal car and drives him over to this restaurant. Adrian Brody is pretty hesitant at first because he's got a job and he can't jeopardize that. So he's like, I only have a certain amount of time allotted for break, and it's not right now. Guy Pearce is like, I'll take care of that. Just come to dinner with me. So he basically sets it up to where, yeah, we can take your break now, but it has to be within the same time.
Yeah.
So he takes him over and gets him a coffee. And then he establishes, hey, I was in an emotional state. My mother was dying. But you did a job that you were commissioned for, and you deserve to be paid for that. You did the job under an agreement, and that needs to be honored. So, like, he shows that he's an honorable guy.
Yeah.
That he's willing to step outside of, whatever advisement he got, even though he's not obligated to necessarily. He didn't make the agreement. His son did. And it was outside of his, permission, essentially. But he's like, that room is beautiful. You did a great job. So I went and looked you up. Which, back then you don't have Google. So
Right.
he had to do some serious work in order to get these pictures from another country. I mean, I don't even know what would be required in order to get that. But then he shows him, he's like, I found like 3 or 4 of your buildings that you created over there, and you're a famous architect. He's like, you do great work. He's like, I want you to come over for dinner at some point. And Adrian Brody, despite his like tension because he needs to get back to work within a certain amount of time, he displays this emotion where he sees his work there, and so it brings all these memories back to the surface, and it's all very clearly portrayed on Adrian Brody's face. So it's one of the best scenes in the movie because of how well they carry the scene, but also because it's so, like you said, it's so tangible.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, okay, something I can sympathize with. This guy is seeing bits of home that he created, that he left behind specifically, that this guy took the time out of his day to find and share with him. So now he gets to have something tangible to remember home by,
Right.
that is his, but it's also a testament to who he was, at least.
Yeah.
So it establishes Guy Pearce's character and the fact that he's willing to make amends despite his emotional outburst. So he shows a bit of honor, a bit of amicable nature, but also like he's willing to honor his debt. So he pays him. And he makes sure, he's like, hey, make sure you put that somewhere where the people aren't going to find it, because people are low on money these days, and like, that's a lot of money. But then, he invites this dirty man into his car, and he's a very wealthy guy. He's a tycoon back in the day. And then there's this like emotional connection between the two. So like the whole scene does a really great job of setting up both characters.
Kind of patching up, like Guy Pearce is like, I need to patch up this interaction because I
goes out
came
of his way
off.
to do that.
Yeah.
And Adrian Brody receives it pretty well, and there's a bit of emotion which is completely devoid in the rest of the film. But like there's an emotional there, the depth there that doesn't seem to be conveyed either before or after.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sets up the depth of both characters and who they are. So like really clearly defines both lines. And then it further does that in the next scene when they go to dinner.
Yeah.
Which is one of the other scenes that I really, really liked, is they have a conversation when Adrian Brody goes to his house party. And it sets up basically the difference between an artist and someone who's, I guess, just businessman we can go with. But he's essentially, he claims that he has no artistic ability at all. Like, that's not the way his brain works, but he appreciates the artist. He's like, I'm no artist myself, but I like the fact that I can have someone who is artistically minded. And so he commissions him on. And they have a really great dichotomy, and the conversation there is really engaging as well.
Yeah.
Like those two scenes, especially in tandem, right next to each other, is what I thought was going to set up for the rest of the movie, but unfortunately, it starts to
Yeah.
meander after there.
And I mean, it sets in motion the rest of the movie because he does commission him shortly after that to build him this structure. It's like this community building. It's supposed to be in memoriam for his late mother. Um, but it's like there's a lot of like interesting things to point out within that, some good and some bad. So for example, there's a lot of good visual storytelling.
Yes.
Like when Guy Pearce goes to pick up Brody for lunch, Adrian Brody is like shoveling coal and he's like standing on this huge pile of coal. And it was an interesting image where I thought, I was like, why is he getting like the high angle here, the high ground? And then I thought, it's almost like he's on a monument of just like nothing, right? It's like he's worked so much, but it's like his world was just turned to like rubble and ash. So he's just like shoveling this coal, and it's like, but it's like he actually did build it. And
But he also took
Guy Pearce is like, that's kind of admirable. I see that it's been destroyed, but I'm actually not looking at that. I'm looking at you.
But it also displays their relationship at that point, because this is where Guy Pearce has essentially put him, because he kicked him out of that library.
Yep.
So now he's working, but he's honestly working, and Guy Pearce is coming in humility to make it right.
Yeah. So
So
he's
it
like,
also
I got to
does
lower
that.
myself because I didn't realize you were a respectable artist.
Yeah.
That
I
was
didn't
on
catch
me.
that. That's perceptive.
Yeah, so that was like a really nice visually told scene, and the whole movie's littered with that. And so people are like, "Oh, it's like a great movie and stuff" because of those reasons. True, but they have to have a point,
Right.
and that's where it starts to hurt because, like in another example, when they're having this dinner scene, there's like a moment where they step away from the group and they're just having a drink and they're talking, and as they're talking, it intersperses with images of like the other attendees, and you see them like like bedding and like, there are a lot of extreme close-ups on like their jewelry and stuff. So you must be thinking to yourself, all right, well, this is showing off just how ridiculously rich these people are. But
Well,
it's like,
also in contrast to what the country was going through, which a lot of poverty and
right, they're pulling out
hunger
of the depression and stuff. But then you see how much they're betting, and everyone's betting like $2.
right.
And I was like, okay, even for that time, like, yes, that's a decent amount of money, like in that time. But if you're rich, you're betting $2. Like, do you really want to lace on that message? Because if so, like, throw something else there so we know like there's actual money being
Make it
on the table.
extravagant. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not made extravagant at all. And I was like, okay, so that's an odd choice. What do I make of that? So, and it's fine that it's not going to go under what I would assume that narrative play out. I appreciate being challenged with something new, but I just haven't come to that conclusion yet, which is why I'm a little bit more like just hands off in some places, and why I say it's going to take time for us to figure it out, because it's like these are extremely curious moves you're making.
Yeah.
And they just don't. They're
curious and curious.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's fair. All told, though, those two scenes are arguably the best and the most grounded scenes in the film.
Yeah.
But it doesn't lend to what the thesis is because, well, frankly, I don't know what the thesis is in the first place.
Okay, yeah. It might actually almost be worthwhile just skipping to the end, which I know sounds crazy, but I think we could do it more or less spoiler free. And like the end is where your thesis is supposed to come together, right? So you go through this movie, this 3.5-hour movie with a 15-minute intermission.
3.5 hours. Let's say it's 3 hours and 20 minutes because of that 15-minute intermission.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, also cool.
I like the intermission.
It was pretty cool. They had like the still
we
shot
should
up
have an
there.
Intermission on this show.
That's a great idea.
I'm taking a break, and then it just plays something nonsense, some nothingness, for like 5 minutes, 15 minutes. We got a 15-minute one. It was nice.
We'll get like a family portrait of us, and we'll just put it up in black and white. 15 minutes for a 45-minute episode. There's no reason to stop it.
It's like a third of the episode.
Yeah. Can't pause in the theater. You can pause this whenever you want, but we'll put an intermission for you. You got it. But yeah, it is cool. It was that also is very classic feeling, because it puts up their family portrait of like Laszlo and his family, and it says, yeah, you got 15, 20 minutes to go, pee or get popcorn or whatever it is you need to do.
The thing is, I think that intermission is just a part of the movie. So I think if you buy The Brutalist on DVD,
It's gonna be in
it's
there?
probably will keep the intermission.
So cool.
I think it will, which is like hilarious. But it's such a long movie that it was
Right.
nice. You know, you went go to the bathroom. I got a snack. It was just like, this is cool. Why don't we have these anymore?
I got a lava cake.
That looked good. Didn't it come with some ice cream?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it just vanilla?
I think so.
Okay.
But I mean, when you got a brownie and
No,
you
it's
got
perfect.
that. Anyway.
Yeah, so we get our nice 15-minute intermission. Okay, so going back to the comment that people had said about the first half being better than the second half, it's not better. It's a little bit more focused, and I think that's just having the benefit of going first.
Could be.
The second half
You
is
just kind of gave up by the second half, so you're just like,
yeah,
anymore.
yeah, I know exactly. Well, it tests your patience, right? Because you're wanting some payoff, and the movie just refuses to let you have that. Absolutely refuses it. That's the most worst. You've just said, something heinous to this movie's eyes, or to its ears. So, what happens is I don't want to spoil it, but it does make a couple of pretty alarming decisions in the latter end of the movie.
You think?
And some people are mixed on it from what I gathered. I am not mixed. I think for the most part they were probably the wrong call because they were just like in your face. And the rest of the movie was subtle to a fault. And this like direction just doesn't work with it. But what was interesting is that at the end of the movie there's a character who does this like kind of recap of Laszlo's life. But the thing she says,
A family member of Laszlo's, by the way.
a family member, yeah,
Who experienced all this.
who experienced a good
firsthand.
number of these
Yep.
things. And the things she says about him are just straight up wrong.
Yep.
So people have been coming away with this movie like, oh, that kind of ruined it because it was telling me what to think. And I was like, no, the things she said don't match the movie we saw. Like, that's not what it was like. That's not what I got shown about his life.
Which, okay, so the interesting thing about art is that it's interpretive, right?
Yeah.
Which is why it's inherently subjective. And so on some level, it may have just been saying like people will read into art whatever it is that they want, right? So maybe that
Yeah.
because it's his niece, this is what she wants it to have meant.
Yeah.
Fair enough. The thing is, like you said, them putting it in the movie is almost like it's almost like they're trying to tell you that this is what you're supposed to get out of it. And for those that weren't paying attention, I guess, they'll just be like, yeah, okay, sure, that's what it meant. But then those of us like us who are just like, that is not the movie we watched at all,
Right.
are just going to be like, well, this just seems like she's kind of an idiot.
Well, the movie's too intentional for this to be a misstep, I think.
Right.
So when
Well,
he
that's the
says
other
this, I'm like,
confusing
I
thing.
don't trust this.
Yeah.
And I think he knows, and the filmmakers prepped us for that. So I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to trust that. And he's like, good, you shouldn't. What she's saying makes no sense.
Which just makes it, in my opinion, feel more out of place. But
I liked it, though, actually, because to me, it felt like she was like, well, let's just put this nice image over it.
sure.
And that's not really, that's not really true to life. I don't know who exactly, I don't know. Would Laszlo even appreciate that? I mean, I don't even know.
He was there.
He was there, but he was so old and decrepit, he had nothing to say or contribute.
Maybe.
It's like it couldn't even register because he was just barely there.
Maybe it was a critique on the fact that we romanticize. Well, because the Brutalist, I mean, is a type of architecture, and it's very harsh and flat, and there's not
Like
a whole
cement
lot of
blocks.
right. It's
Yeah.
very square and doesn't seem to have a lot of life to it. But we tend to romanticize art, especially with time. And I wonder if that's what they were critiquing at the end, is that this person was trying to romanticize all the horrible things that had created this building.
Yeah.
Maybe that's my best interpretation. That this is not my forte. Obviously, I didn't even know brutalism was a type of architecture before. I thought he was just gonna be a real mean gangster.
The thing with I mean, here's like the other element at play too, because she kind of talks him up a little bit in that end.
Yes.
And she describes him almost like we watched a more traditional biopic, but that's not what this was. So you go back and you start thinking over the scenes, and like one of them I can think of, or a couple, is like he gets real mad during the production of this building. And it just starts off and he like slams the paper on someone's desk and he's all pissed off that someone else is involved. And he's like, he's mad because this other guy they brought on to kind of help with the architectural design, he wants to lower the ceiling. He thinks it's too high. And, you know,
Well,
Laszlo's
he's
like,
looking at it in a business sense. So the interesting thing is
Yeah.
that Guy Pearce says, I want you to build this building, so draw me some plans. Laszlo does. But then he has other architectures in there that are they're giving their input, and Guy Pearce seems to be accepting some of them, or the guy in charge of like the budget, essentially. So budgetarily, he's like, yeah, these ceilings can't be this high. We can't afford it. So we're going to just lower it a little bit because it's not going to affect anything. Laszlo takes offense to that because artistically it's supposed to be this high. This is how I drew it.
right.
That's how high it's supposed to be. So he freaks out. He has like
Yeah.
this total meltdown when this guy is just like, yeah, well, we can't just be spending a bunch of money. We don't have all of that.
Right.
So we're going to lower the ceilings a little bit.
And then Laszlo says like, okay, well, I'm going to put my money in to cover this cost.
So yeah, he cuts his salary.
Yeah.
He hands it back for it.
Which is like, okay, like he's dying on the hill of his art. And you're like, all right, well, that seems like a powerful message. What's so
Sure.
wrong about this? What's so wrong is the character is Jewish and he is making a Christian building with like a cross and everything.
Yeah, he's
Why
already
didn't you die on that hill?
he's already
What?
compromising on the fact that he didn't want this to have any symbolism in it. It was just going to be
Yeah.
community building. But the people in the community were like, no, this has to have like a place of gathering for a Christian ceremony if need be.
Right.
And he's like, well, I guess I'll just have to adjust then. But then when someone wants to lower the ceilings, he's
How
like,
dare you?
no way, man. So it just was weird to which principles he was going to adhere, because
The-
that one seemed like a less important one.
Way less.
Because like
The-
Christianity is not his religion, so
Right.
like
The-
why would he want to promote it?
The only thing I could see was that I was like, all right, so this is a hill he's able to die on. Is that what the point is?
Could be.
Because he does need the money. So, I mean, he could continue working construction, but it's like you
Well-
get to do art, but at a cost, and he accepts that cost. But then it's like, it's almost like, you know, I accept that there's going to be compromises, and I'm doing this work for you, but then someone has to come in and like, can you do it a little bit this way? And it's like, no, I'm not going to let you have your petty
Sure.
win here. But then the only way to counteract it is to be petty yourself. So,
Right, but that was the weird thing, is that one, it didn't clearly show why that one was so important. Like, yeah, it might have been the
Yeah.
thing he can control, but also this is where it plays more into the fact that it was hard to sympathize with him, is that now he's got a wife and his niece to care for, which is through this salary that he's just throwing back into the building. So now it's like, now you're sacrificing your family for the height of this ceiling. Like, yeah, and I understand that when you have an artistic endeavor, like there's a standard to which you want it to reach. But is that really how far you want to go to achieve that goal? Because again, this is not his building. This is a
Right.
building that's been commissioned by someone else and has already gone through a bunch of changes based on other people. And we got into this discussion with Complete Unknown, where Bob Dylan was fighting against, like, I don't want to be put into a box. I want to be artistically relevant, but also I want to give the message that I'm giving. So if I'm starting to grow in a different sense from my original audience, like, I should be allowed to do that. It's my music. It's kind of the same here, where it's like, but it's not his building in the first place. Like, none of this has been, you know, up to his standards. So it was a weird thing when he started fighting over the ceiling, especially when his family was put in jeopardy for it. It was like, well, I don't understand why this is important, because the movie doesn't show you. Again, it's not holding your hand at all,
Right.
like you said, to a fault.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder a little bit too about, look, I don't want to like pick on architectures or architects and say like they're not artists or something like that, but it's like I don't know enough about the merging between being an artist and being an architect very well. So this
Sure.
is just my limitation. Here's the example I will present though, and this is a true story. So there was a guy who didn't really work a day in his life, but he was an artist. And him and his family needed money really bad. So he got commissioned to do a piece of art. True story, by the way. He gets commissioned to do a piece of art. He makes this piece of art, but he already does all kinds of art on his own. So he does it for himself and for personal reasons. Then he gets a commission. He makes this art. And then when he presents it to the benefactor, they were like, can you make a few changes here? And what did he do? He ripped it up. And my grandmother was furious.
It's not his piece in the first place. That's the point.
Well, that's the whole thing. So like, yeah, that's where I guess I deviate from my grandfather, because my grandfather was like, look, I'm the artist. You asked for a piece of art. Here it is. If you don't like it, just F you, basically.
Go get someone
right?
else.
Go get somebody else. Yeah. I take the more stance like, look, you have your personal art. This was something you did as a commission.
Right.
They want something.
Or if they want to change it, then that's their prerogative.
Right.
Yeah.
It's their commission. Just Now, it's like, I don't know the exact circumstances of how that conversation went down, so maybe they were more horrible and demeaning than that. But, like, you have kids to take care of, man.
Right.
It just kind of doesn't really matter. Like, and I hate saying that because it's terrible, but I guess, like, when it comes to Laszlo, the reason I bring all this up is, like, Laszlo is an architect, but I don't know many architects who just build buildings for fun.
Right.
Like, they have to build buildings because they have commissions, always. And that must have been intentional on the part of the filmmakers, because you don't just make a movie, you have to get it approved. You have to, in some ways, it is a producer's commission. So I wonder if that's why he chose architect to tell the story, because maybe he was trying to say about the innate relationship the two share. And when you're like a writer or a painter or a musician, you have more freedom. Even if you don't get the same acknowledgement, you do have more freedom in what you choose to make. Because in other fields, like especially these massive money, investing projects, like you just have to, you're just never going to make that perfect dream project, I don't think, right?
Fair enough. Yeah, maybe. Again, though, the movie doesn't make that entirely clear either. It's just like, nope, that's the hill he wants to die on. I guess I'll just accept that then.
Well, but here's the thing. I'm making it clear. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
So if I'm making sense, that's all the movie has to accomplish, I would argue.
Yeah, I guess there's that. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's like someone has to be able to get the threat.
So
Someone
what we're
has to be able
saying
to-
is watch the HolmFront, and then we'll make everything clear for you where the movie will fail.
All right, so talk to me. How are you holding up? Seems like you're at your wits' end watching the movie. Now it sounds like you're at your wits' end talking about this movie.
No,
Well, I feel like we're kicking into gear. We're starting to cook with gas now.
No, I think well, I mean, yeah, like I said, I'm not gonna watch it again. It's just not.
I might.
It's
I
not
will.
my style of film at all in any way. It does have its redeeming qualities, and I think I've gone over those, and I think I described them as best I could. But yeah, I mean, you're obviously picking out more from it. What else did you want to go over with this one?
Well, I'd like to hear what you thought about it being fatalistic, because that was your definition for the film as a thesis. And then I got one more kind of takeaway.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, most of my points have been leaning in that direction anyway. It just seems to be devoid of any, and this might just be the film, like you said, to a fault, not holding your hand, just really wanting you to pick out what you're going to get from it. But it almost does it in like segments, right? People have tended to cut this between the two intermission points, the beginning and the end, the first and the second half.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's even further segments. I mean, there's the one where he immigrates into America. There's the scene where he's kind of trying to establish himself. There's the scene where he's like being commissioned by Guy Pearce. And there's the part where he's actually building the building. And then there's the parts with his family. Like, they're all kind of separate. And they kind of affect each other in certain ways, but like they're all separate parts of his life, and they all seem really negative. Aside from like
really negative.
I will say, like, there seems to be more positive things that happen in the beginning, and maybe that's what people see. Like,
Okay.
That's where he gets commissioned. That's where his wife does show up finally.
Mm-hmm.
But within the second half, like, everything seems to really just go bad for him, or he takes everything really badly. So that's where I kind of feel like this goes into a real depressive state. And like you said, self-destructive is probably a better word for it, but like he's constantly shooting up. He even shoots his wife up at one point and gives her overdose because she's dealing with some pain. And
accidentally, but yes.
Yeah, and it's done to like help her, but like it's a really destructive habit. So you're kind of like, ooh, I don't know if this is the way I'd want to go. But then he just seems to be really exploding on everybody. And some of it is because he feels like he's being taken advantage of, but also he blames it all on that. But also he's made a lot of really self-destructive choices just in general too. and he has a real like almost nihilistic way of looking at life. And he's just like, no one wants me, and everyone hates me. It's like, dude, this guy commissioned you to build a building, like to do your dream in America.
Yeah.
He got your wife here, your family. He's like accommodating. I'm not really sure what you're wanting from this that you're not getting, because you're also not trying to change anything. You fought one battle,
Yeah.
which I'm still trying to like understand
why.
fully, because you didn't fight another battle that seemed more important. And so to me, it felt like I couldn't jump on board with anything he was doing or trying to imbibe. It almost made me wish that the end scene was true. 'Cause it was like I liked her romantic view of things, because it just seemed nicer than the rest of this movie.
Yeah, and that point is interesting because it's almost like the movie, because it's so like grounded, that when it comes to that end, it's almost like anti-romanticism.
Right.
Or fatalism, where it's like,
Which is
there's
the
nothing
genre we put in
glamorous
this.
about this man's life. He was an artist, and it was ugly, and he was a
the
crappy
tortured
person. He
artist.
was the tortured artist, and
Yeah.
it was terrible. There you go. That's your message. And that scene is just a reminder of what the movie was not.
Right.
You know, kind of thing.
And romanticism is kind of the genre we give it, even though I don't even think that's an actual genre.
Yeah, I don't
but
think
it is
that's
now.
an actual. I would ordinarily say like realism, but I don't know that it quite is that way either.
Right. Well, it was really trying to make sure that you couldn't romanticize this film. I think that's probably one of its points.
Yeah.
So when you said anti-romanticization, like it really was making sure there's nothing in here to make you look back with rose-tinted goggles to make this film look better. Like this,
Yeah.
there's a lot of horrible things happening in this, and he has a really horrible view on life, and it's sad. It's depressing.
Yeah, no, it is sad and depressing. It does, as my history film professor once said, it leaves me cold. He didn't say it about this movie, but he said it about Citizen Kane. We had a conversation about that movie. I was like, I get why people say that's the greatest film ever, but I'm like, and I couldn't find the right word. And he was like, it leaves me cold. And I was like,
This movie
perfect way
definitely did the same thing.
Yeah, it's very cold. It's very harsh. And, a part of that does feel intentional, because like I can kind of sympathize with at least the idea of like, you have this character who's an immigrant. He comes out of the fire, and then it's almost like, or out of the frying pan and into the fire, kind of, in some ways. But it is just really sad to see how like the just total failure to adapt. Like, and I get it. There are definitely scenes where characters are mean to him and his family. They're a little bit like racist sometimes. They're a little bit like, when they're drunk or things like that. But this is a 3.5-hour movie, and those scenes come mostly at the end, and there's hardly any of them.
Yeah.
Like hardly any. So most of what you get is like,
he takes it negative.
Yeah, he's taking everything so negatively.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I don't know. He got you. He paid you. He got your family here.
Yep.
There's not a single point or single moment where you're like, geez, just like, thank you. Like, I think I would feel that no matter how dire or straight, because it's like I got my wife back. Like,
well, that's okay. So
that's world shattering.
That was the other scene that I thought was really interesting, is that he goes to a dinner with Guy Pearce, and Guy Pearce has this lawyer there, and he specifically asks like, "Hey, where's your family at?" And he's like, "Oh, they're still over there, and it's a really complicated process coming over. I don't think it's gonna happen." So like again, he's just kind of like, it's just not going to work out. He's not doing anything about it at all.
Mm-hmm.
But the lawyer goes, there is a way, and I'll help you do it. You just need X, Y, and Z. So when he does that, it kind of gives him a little bit of hope-ish. It doesn't really come through him, but he calls his wife, or he sends a letter. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Sends a letter and says, hey, you need X, Y, and Z. And the wife is like, that was really difficult, but I got it all done. I was like, well, she's working hard. Like, it seems like now we got an out. He just seemed so hopeless and fatalistic about that prospect. It was like, you're not going to move heaven and earth to get your family over here when you know what they're going through? Like, what are you doing over here? It just seemed like he was just so aimless in all of it. It just seemed when opportunities came to him that he took them rather than seeking them out.
Yeah.
And so that was what was so frustrating, because then after all these opportunities are presented, he's just like, oh, this is terrible, and I just feel out of place, and I feel underappreciated, and like, dude, your family's here in the land of opportunity. Like, if you don't like what you're getting, you've got a job. Like, start making your way out of this scenario that you're in that you don't like. It just didn't seem like he was doing anything about it. He was just like, well, I'm in the hole. I guess I'm stuck here forever.
Yeah. There's another interesting parallel, too. So true story. Are you down for another story?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so true story. There's a young boy and a young girl. They're Russian. They meet and they fall in love. And they meet in a concentration camp.
Okay.
And they survive this concentration camp. And afterwards, Russia tells them, well, we forgive you for anything you might have told the Germans. So they didn't take very kindly to that message. And so they skip town and they go out to Canada where they serve as indentured servants, slaves basically, on a beet farm for 10 years. And then after that, it's only after that time they've paid off their debts and they get their visas approved and they can come down and be U.S. citizens. And when they became U.S. citizens, they didn't teach their kids how to speak Russian. They were just like, whatever, we're getting rid of it. We're speaking English now. And they took real issue with illegal immigrants of every kind because to them, it was like, hey, I just sacrificed 10 years of my life. And they loved America. And this is the same time period as this movie, by the way. The same like 40s and or like the turn of the century or whatever. So these were my grandparents.
Figured.
My
Learned a lot of family history today.
Yeah, my other family grandparents. I know. But the thing is like, and again, I don't have to feel the same way about it as they do. But there is some level of like I at least respect their perspective because in their eyes, they're like, they were just unbelievably grateful. And they were like in sobbing tears when they got confirmed to be like American citizens. Because to them, it was like, I left something so heinous and horrible.
Sure.
And now I'm like here and I actually have a chance to like build a life for myself and my family. And what Adrian Brody represents is like more modern day like people is what it feels like.
Kind of entitlement almost.
Well, kind of, but it's almost like you come to America expecting it to be better, and then it's like the same song and dance, or like there's all these like microaggressions or whatever. And that's what they are. They are microaggressions until the end comes in when it wants to ramp up the tension and they become like major aggressions. But when it does that, they're not earned because there's nothing to lead up to them. They just happen. And you're like, who is nothing about this scene indicated that this character would ever do this thing, but I guess they're doing it now. So, okay. So, but I, just as like a comparison, it feels like this is a strange amalgamation movie where it's like set in a time period, but like bringing in like more
Modern.
present day perspectives about how we see America and immigration and these other topics.
Maybe. So it's almost like trying to be artistic in the fact that it's handling both. Like it's a window into time, but also a window into now.
I think so, because I don't think it's very accurate to how a lot of actual immigrants feel. I mean, I could be wrong about that. I know some people online I was reading were saying like, oh, wow, that like empowering impression of like seeing America for the first time hit me so home as an immigrant. I was like, that makes sense. But I'm also like, were you also like a depraved person are you just like shooting up in bathrooms
and meeting prostitutes all over the place too? Like, and getting crazy opportunities. Like,
I want to know more about your experience.
Right. Come on the show. We'll interview you. Has to be as close to this movie as possible, though. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, there are those themes in there, but again, it gets kind of washed through with all this other stuff. It felt like it was trying to bite off
way more than it can chew, maybe.
Either more than it could chew or more than it could convey to the audience appropriately.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that.
And so I was getting pretty lost, especially after 3.5 hours. Like, that's a long slog for any film. But then, like, with all the stuff it keeps throwing at you, you're just like, oh, okay. You just feel tired afterwards.
It is a very
The intermission
film.
is fantastic. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Best move the movie made. Maybe that's the best scene.
Yeah. The 15 minutes that I got to go pee.
It's still worth seeing, though, because, I mean, if for no other reason, it's probably going to win Best Picture. I would bet my life on it.
Really? You think over?
Oh, yeah.
Contenders, okay.
Oh, yeah. Hands down. If the only situation it doesn't win, I mean, this is a movie where it shows the Statue of Liberty upside down with, like, music. Like, obviously, it's shot in VistaVision. Like, what do you want from me? It's about, like, an immigrant to the U.S. Like, this is Oscar bait up to wazoo. It's not as much as Oppenheimer. That was the most Oscar bait movie ever made.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
not that it was a bad movie, and Christopher Nolan was just dedicated to his craft, but it's like the very nature of what you're making is Oscar bait, dude.
Sure.
But this movie is like, it's like that. The thing it doesn't have is it doesn't have like the revenue return. That hurts it a little bit, but that's been less important ever since Coda, I think. because that was like an Apple TV movie,
Gotcha.
which is like, how did that win? Yeah. So, and I will say, like, my kind of final sentiment on this movie, it left me feeling very nostalgic in like a really painful way, like the most painful nostalgia I've ever had. Nostalgia is usually nice, but this was like miserable. And the reason it was so miserable is it's sort of like brought up because it's like shot like an old movie. It just made you think of older times. But when it depicted those older times, it was with all the grunge and the crap that you see nowadays. And so because it had that in it too.
Like diluting it.
Yeah, it's like diluted it. And
Like
it's like
black colored glasses. Like, oh.
Yeah, black tinted glasses. It's just like,
Bring back the roses.
or it's just like streaks of mud on your glasses. That just like,
They're all scratched up.
Yeah. So that was something that it made me think that I feel like is apropos. I don't know. It won't be the worst Best Picture winner ever, but I don't know that it's the greatest. I do, and I honestly feel like it probably should win just because it's so, like, at least compared to what they have on the list. What should win is Nosferatu, but that's not up there.
Dune 2.
Or that. Yeah.
Well.
Very frustrating movie.
It's extremely frustrating. One of the most unsatisfying films.
Here's this nice nostalgia. No, let me just strangle it.
Get out of the theater. You just leave. Like, you feel like you opened a present that was empty. It's a real nicely wrapped present, and you're just like, there's nothing in here. It's like, yeah, that's what you get. Go.
Or it's like a teddy bear, but then you pick it up, and then there's like the stuffing all falls out. And it's like impossible to repair, and it's all chewed up, and you're like, wait a minute.
The dog's toy.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Brutalist. What an interesting movie.
That's certainly a word for it.
This year has been
A roller coaster.
It has been that's a good one. Yeah, it's all kinds of ups and downs, but man, because it had some of the greatest ups and some of the lowest downs for sure.
Yeah, you know what movie I was just thinking of that we never saw or reviewed that was also horribly panned was Borderlands.
Oh my gosh.
I remember that sinking to like 9% or something in Rotten Tomatoes. It was like,
I don't want to watch that.
I don't either. But I mean, it's like, if you want to cover 2024, the amount of crappy movies you have to watch, it's dangerous levels.
They really made sure that they set the bar lower than it was before.
Oh, yeah. This was like, way down here.
Man, it really can't get worse than this, right? And they're like, watch us.
Yeah.
We got this.
But we've seen some, well, I guess, I mean, you saw, we saw Dune 2. We saw Complete Unknown. You really liked that one. So those are two Oscar movies that you're like, yeah, those were good movies.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was a couple of things that had nominations that I liked. Like, I watched Different Man.
Okay.
Which was also, it was good. I mean, it's unusual.
Okay.
Very unusual. I will say one of the things I really appreciate about this year that seems to be coming to fruition is that a lot of horror films seem to be getting a lot of attention.
That's been cool.
Now, that's fun on both sides. For one, that they're getting recognition, but for two, it seems like they're upping their class.
Yeah.
And so they're actually making it here.
You're right.
It's like, that's pretty cool too. And I haven't seen a lot of them.
Substance. There's been a number of other ones.
I haven't seen. I do want to see Substance. I
Same.
did see Nosferatu, and it does have merit.
Yeah, I mean, at
see
least
our
you
previous video.
can't call it horror schlock at the very least.
No.
You know, so it's like, it's worth something.
You can call it horrifying. We have a review if you want to see more thoughts on Nosferatu.
Yeah, we'll have to revisit it too when we've covered a few more, and then we'll do an episode just talking about the Oscars and what's
We
up
should
there.
do all the horror films that the Oscars have recognized. That would be
really
episode.
fun. Yeah.
That'd be cool. Yeah, I am glad that it's getting some recognition because, I mean, it definitely deserves a couple of those for sure. If nothing else, cinematography like that, it very well deserves that one. But yeah, and I'm not saying that this one doesn't deserve it either. It's just a very strange script.
It would be nice if it wasn't. It was like maybe he took that unsatisfying point a little
Too far. Way too far.
You'll hate yourself by the end of this movie.
Yeah, like, jeez. I got like sudden onset depression here.
So how many
It's like
SpongeBob?
sad but sawed. What?
How many SpongeBob episodes did you need to review to purge afterwards?
It wasn't that bad. It wasn't.
Okay.
It wasn't so dark and oppressive as Nosferatu. Nosferatu required a lot of SpongeBob. By the way, cure for rough movies, SpongeBob. It's great.
SquarePants.
We should do a SpongeBob episode.
Apparently.
All right. I think that's a good wrap. Thank you for joining us. That has been our review on The Brutalist, which is not a gangster movie, by the way.